When we think of the space race, we imagine pristine white laboratories, elite astronauts in tailored suits, and the polished pride of superpowers competing for the stars. We imagine perfection. But in the frozen back alleys of 1950s Moscow, the key to unlocking space wasn't found in a pedigree. It was found in the mud. While American scientists were often looking toward established breeds or carefully controlled laboratory animals, Soviet military scientists were doing something radical. They were scouring the streets. They weren't looking for champions. They weren't looking for obedience. They were looking for survivors. This was the paradoxical selection. The Soviet program, led by figures like Vladimir Yazdovsky, understood a fundamental truth that elite trainers missed. You cannot train resilience. You can only inherit it. The brutal Russian winter acted as a natural selection filter more rigorous than any controlled breeding program. These dogs had already conquered the cold. They had already mastered hunger. They had already learned to remain calm in the face of chaos. They called them dvornyagi, yard dogs, common mutts. Ignored by society, these animals possessed a physiological grit that no laboratory could ever breed. They were the elite scavengers of the Soviet alleys, and their modern urban survival traits mirrored the extreme demands of early spaceflight technology. Why did this matter? Because space is not just a physical challenge, it is a psychological one. The vacuum of the stratosphere is silent, isolating, and terrifying. A panicked animal thrashes. A thrashing animal breaks sensors. A broken sensor means mission failure. But the street dog knows how to wait. The street dog knows how to endure. In these frozen becks, ignoring pedigrees entirely, they found the pioneers. These were not creatures created for comfort. They were forged by the streets. And as we will see, this specific psychological profile, this psychological stillness, would become the single most important factor in surviving the lethal conditions of high-altitude exploration. To understand why these mutts were chosen, we must look beneath the fur. A life of scavenging is not just a hardship, it is a rigorous training program for the metabolism. These animals developed a metabolic flexibility that pampered pedigrees simply did not possess. In the labs, scientists compared the heart rate stability of street dogs against bred animals under high G stress. The results were startling. The pedigrees, unused to adversity, showed erratic spikes in heart rate panic manifesting as physiological chaos. The strays? Their hearts beat with a rhythmic, stubborn consistency. They had learned to conserve energy, to slow their bodies down when food was scarce and danger was high. This metabolic efficiency was crucial for surviving erratic oxygen levels. In the unpressurized cabins of early rocket flights, oxygen was a luxury. The stray's body, accustomed to making do with less, could withstand the hypoxic conditions longer than any animal bred for comfort. They were biologically pre-adapted to the edge of space. Then there was the cold. The sub-zero temperatures of the stratosphere mimicked the harshest Moscow winters. These dogs had slept on frozen ground. They had endured winds that cut like glass. Their bodies had built a hidden biological resilience, a thicker coat, a slower heat loss, a circulatory system optimized for survival. This was not science. This was street wisdom encoded in DNA. While other nations sought to engineer the perfect astronaut, the Soviets found theirs in the gutter. They realized that the underdog had an edge that no amount of laboratory breeding could replicate. The physiological grit of the scavenger was the ultimate insurance policy against the unknown. But physiology was only half the battle. The body could endure the cold, but could the mind endure the silence? Could the heart endure the isolation? As the rockets prepared for launch, the true test would not be of muscle or bone, but of spirit. The launch was not a gentle lift, it was a violent expulsion from Earth. Inside the cramped, unpressurized capsule, the sensory overload was absolute. The roar of the engines, the crushing weight of acceleration, the sudden shift in gravity. For any animal, this was a recipe for panic. But for the Moscow stray, chaos was a familiar companion. As the engines cut out, silence fell. Not the quiet of a room, but the absolute deafening silence of the stratosphere. This was the moment that broke many. The isolation, the weightlessness. But the data coming back to Earth told a different story for the strays. Their heart rates, which had spiked during launch, settled into a rhythmic calm. They did not fight the harness, they did not scratch at the walls. This was the psychological stillness the scientists had bet their program on. A pampered pet, terrified by the unfamiliar, would have destroyed sensitive instruments in a frenzy. But the street dog, it accepted the situation. It conserved its energy. It waited. This stillness was not passive. It was an active survival strategy honed by years of navigating a hostile world. The telemetry confirmed it. These animals could handle the transition from Earth's gravity to weightlessness without losing their minds. They proved that resilience was not about strength, but about adaptability. The stray's mind, flexible and forgiving, could accommodate the impossible. And when the parachutes deployed and the capsule slammed back into the reality of Earth, the dogs emerged not as victims, but as veterans. They had touched the edge of space and returned. They had faced the vacuum and remained still. In doing so, they had solved the greatest psychological hurdle of spaceflight, the fear of the unknown. They were not just test subjects. They were the pioneers who proved that life could endure the harshness of the cosmos. And as we look back at their legacy, we see that the key to the stars was not found in the perfection of breeding, but in the grit of the street. Today, when we look at the International Space Station or plan missions to Mars, we stand on the shoulders of giants. But some of those giants had 4 legs, matted fur, and eyes that had seen the bottom of Moscow's snowbanks. The legacy of these street-forged pioneers is complex. It is a story of scientific triumph, yes, but also of profound ethical weight. We owe a profound scientific debt to the scavengers of the 1950s. They provided the data that made human spaceflight possible. They taught us how life responds to weightlessness, to radiation, to isolation. But their contribution was not just biological, it was philosophical. They challenged our definition of worth. In an age of artificial intelligence and simulated training environments, we often forget the power of raw, lived experience. The grit of the street remains a more powerful metric for endurance than any simulation. These dogs prove that true resilience cannot be taught in a classroom or bred in a lab. It is forged in the fire of survival. They were the unlikely heroes of high-altitude exploration. Not chosen for their beauty, but for their burden. Not for their pedigree, but for their pain. And in their stillness, in their quiet acceptance of the impossible, they showed us the way to the stars. They were not just dogs. They were the first cosmonauts. And their legacy is written not in stone, but in the stars. History is often written by the victors, but it is forged by the survivors. If this journey through the frozen alleys of Moscow touched your soul, if you found resonance in the silence of those stray pioneers, then you are part of this story too. We explore the hidden narratives, the unsung heroes, and the quiet strength that shapes our world. Join us in uncovering the souls hidden in the mist. Subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, and let us know. Where else do you see resilience hiding in plain sight? Until next time, keep looking for the light in the shadows.